Welcome back to KEMAR CSECRESOURCES. Today's audio session is brought to you by Caribbean Studies, and the topic that we'll be focusing on today from the syllabus: factors that promote and hinders development. Now, based on the syllabus and what CXC requires you to know, the objectives, you should be able to identify what is gender inequality, political ideologies and popular movements, distribution of wealth and resources, changing of class boundaries, entrepreneurial drive and activity, natural and human-made disasters, government policies, use of technology, global conditions, quality and relevance of education. We're going to look at tourism. And with that, we're going to look at the contribution, the challenges, and Caribbean tourism organizations. So, first off, we're going to look at factors that promote development and the entrepreneurial drive and activity. Now, contribution to economy is of immense value, right? It helps in the growth of national income and per capita income. It also stimulates the economy through investments, through employment, and the diversity in products and services, and also international trade, trading among nations. So these are factors that promote development, right? The different entrepreneurial drives and activity. So investing in resources, providing employment, and etc. Now the political ideology and the popular movements, right? So we can look at capitalism. Now, capitalism would often attract investors because there is minimal intervention by government, right? These individuals control the means of production and distribution. The only thing governments do is to ensure that the companies respect the rights of workers and their trade group. So with capitalism, it attracts investors because there is a minimal intervention by the government. And these individuals control the means of production, so what to produce, how to produce, and those economic questions. And they also control the distribution chain of these goods. So what he's saying is that the only thing that the government can do, or the role that the government will play in the capitalist, is to ensure that these companies respect the rights of workers. So the rights of workers must be observed, right? And they have their trade groups. When we look at the distribution of wealth and resources, now investment and reinvestment of entrepreneurs across an entire nation will help to reduce unemployment, right? So entrepreneurs can help to reduce unemployment. Therefore, persons would have disposable income. So when you're being employed, in exchange you earn an income. So these persons would have earned disposable incomes through job opportunities, employment. The demands for goods and services will increase as there would be more money in circulation. So in order for consumers to buy goods and services, you need money. How do you get money? How do you earn money? That is from your income. That means that you have to be employed to be getting the money from somewhere, unless you have other sources. But the main source of getting an income is for you to be employed to a job. And when there's less unemployment, meaning that majority of persons are working and receiving an income, these people will now have more income, more profit, more money, so that they can buy goods and services that they are demanding. So the change in class boundaries. Now the injection of funds into the education system, right? One, it would have allowed persons to be exposed to education, and it would also break the cycle of poverty. So if we inject funds into the education system, meaning we are investing in the education system, right? Making it free for all so that it is affordable. Nothing is purely free, but we want to make education accessible to the wide society, that everyone will be exposed to education, everyone will have access to education. And having persons having access to education, it can break the cycle of poverty, because for majority of these jobs, you need to be educated individuals, or the high paid jobs, you need to be educated individuals. And if you're not educated, it is not easy for them to secure these jobs. Hence, they would have been unemployed, and unemployment will lead to poverty. So now we look at government policies. Now, the government must provide an enabling environment for the private sector to conduct businesses, such as intensiveness to support small business. So we need to have these as our government policies, right? We need to also reduce taxes on goods that are imported into the economy to be used in the agriculture and manufacturing sector. Next, there are also higher taxes on goods that are imported and also produced available locally. We can also look at effective monitoring policies. This would have include controlling the supply of money, keeping the inflation rate low. This also includes ensuring that there is price stability. This also includes the general trust, right? The confidence in the currency, the value, the worth. We can also look at the disciplined fiscal policy, right? Adjusting the spending levels to avoid large deficits. Now, when all of this is done, investors will feel more confident, right, that they are operating in a stable economic environment. We can also look at the use of technology, right? Technology. No, the use of technology has transformed the world's economy, and we're seeing that every day. We also see that the use of technology, it transitions from manual to electronic delivery services. This is done in the public and private sector, right? We're seeing advancements of the business community throughout the world. It also improves and enhances the development in the nation states that can afford to do so. So in more of the developed countries with a lot of technological assets, and the transition of older or outdated resources, which is now transformed into technology. We can also look at transformed business relations with the availability of the internet, such as e-commerce, right? The buying and selling of goods and services over the internet. We look at e-banking, right? Telebanking, right? We look at Skype, WhatsApp. Even though we're not using Skype anymore, we can also look at the fax machines, right? It transcends geography, the distance using fiber optics for immediate connection between the Caribbean and the world. Now, this would have allowed many transactions to be done easily and speedily. Individuals would have worked from home, right? We're still talking about technology here, right? The companies outsource their work, right? They pay the bills and purchase things online. We look at e-marking, e-registration of students, right, for CXC, etc. So when we look at the factors that hinder development and gender inequality, we can say that gender disparity is rooted in some societies where a segment of the population is marginalized, right? Especially the females, which is affecting development. Now it affects poverty, education, access to healthcare, productivity, household income, the savings, government revenue, the demand for goods and services. It would have also created insecurity. It lowers the social cohesion. Now with the popular movements, let us talk about that. So a large and sometimes informal groups of individuals, right, which focus on specific social and political issues. They are pressured groups for a particular cause. They are assertive and militant in nature, right? They appeal to the masses, such as trade unions, consumer groups, right? It hinders development by engaging in industrial actions or actions which can cause instability in a country. When we look at political ideologies, we can say that this is a set of principles, doctrines, or ideals of a social movement that explains how a society should work. If a society embraces socialism, communism, Marxism, right, Cuba, this would hinder development because governments tend to control the commanding heights of the economy, right? They control all utilities, etc. in the country. There is no private sector. And this is a system which preaches, right, take from the wealthy, give to the poor. Right? We're seeing that with the PATH programs and those stuff. It embraces equality for all. Now, when we look at natural and man-made disasters, right, our region is exposed to geographic and geological hazards. And we would have looked at this when we would have looked at the definitions of the Caribbean. We look at geographic and we look at geological, right? We talk about flooding, right? Seismic activities, hurricanes, oil spill, pollution, wildfires, global warming, and you have more. Now, distribution of wealth and resources. Now, if wealth is concentrated in a particular strata or group, only those persons would benefit from such. It would have lead to high unemployment, low expenditure. It brings frustration, right? Alienation, which leads to social unrest, corruption, capital flight. It can lead to brain drain, can make a country dependent on external forces for survival and economic sustainability, right? Institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF. Now, with government policies, with the oppressive taxation of companies and the general population, so it discourages potential investors, the capital flight, right? Where people take money and leave. It increases poverty, social and political instability. Now, with the changing class boundaries, where class boundaries exist, there is no avenue for upward social mobility. This can lead to hostility, as people see themselves as inferior to those who are in higher status brackets. Now, this kind of situation would increase the poverty rate, making it virtually impossible for the poor to help themselves out of the situation that they're in. Now, where there is large income gap between the different social groups and the social stratification becomes entrenched. Now, there will be fewer opportunities for persons to have a decent job, relevant training, exposed to credit services, healthcare, housing, etc. Now, with the use of technology, right, the inaccessibility of funding to purchase up to date equipment, that is another issue that we are having. Now, with the global conditions, we can see where global warming in developing countries, right, the speeding up of the Earth's hydrological cycle causing both drought and flood, right, making the land less productive, causes not to be able to be self-sufficient and therefore lead to importation of goods and services, which is an additional expense, right? It leads to countries becoming dependent on external agencies. For example, with Grenada that had Hurricane Ivan, Haiti with Matthew, right? Now, the economic misfortune since 2008, right? We had a recession there. Now, it would have caused a reduction in visitor arrival in the region, which translated to more spending. It would have caused a wage freeze in the Caribbean, higher taxes, unemployment due to restructuring, moving towards protectionism, right? There was stricter border control to reduce the free movement of people, and it led to the emergence of populist governments, right, which plays on vulnerabilities of individuals. It also lead to political volatility, right? Brexit. We can also talk about tourism with the degradation of the environment, right? With the beach erosion, the habitat destruction, the aesthetic reduction, the pollution, water pollution, right? Solid waste, natural resource overuse, right? Such as the coral reef. We can look at the escalating land prices. Foreigners purchase the lands, raising the prices. The use of agricultural land for Gulf. We can look at the erasure of values, right? With drug use, prostitution, unsavory individuals. We can also look at the leakages of funds, right? All inclusive hotels, right? The money going back to the other country, repatriation, money wasted in marketing goods and services, seasonality of jobs such as like the tourist season, carnival, etc. We can also talk about competition from cheaper destinations. We can also talk about foreign ownership, right? The MNCs, multinational companies. For example, KFC here in Jamaica, right? We do not own KFC, right? We don't own the brand of KFC. But when they conduct business here in Jamaica, for example, the profit that they are earning is being repatriated back into their home country, right? So we also can talk about the multinational companies. We can also look at discrimination, right? Tourists over the locals. And when you look around, really and truly, people tend to treat the tourists much better than the locals, than the people that we are around every day. When we see the tourists, it's like we're trying to create an impression, right? Whether is it that we're getting to buy things from them or just creating a good look, right? We treat them better, so we can talk about discrimination, tourists versus locals, right? With discrimination also, we continue to have slave master relationships and so on. And last but not least, we're susceptible to disasters, epidemics, and recession. So for this topic, we looked at the factors that would have hindered development, and we also looked at the factors that would have also promoted development. So factors that would have promoted development, we spoke about the entrepreneurial drive and activity. We spoke about the political ideology, the popular movements. We spoke about distribution of wealth and resources, changing class boundaries, government policies. We speak about use of technology and so forth. And when we say promote, what would have contributed to development for it going further? We also spoke about the factors that would have hindered development, the drawbacks of development. What is the blocker? What would have blocked development? So we looked at gender inequality, right? We looked at the popular movements as well. We looked at the political ideologies, right? We looked at the natural and man-made disasters, distribution of wealth and resources. We also spoke about the government policies, changing class boundaries. We spoke about the use of technology, the global conditions, and tourism. So for each of these factors, they have their merits and their demerits. So even though it can promote development, in some way or form, it can also hinder development. So this is all we need to know for this topic, which is required based on the syllabus for factors that promote and hinders development. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and even leave a comment about something you learned or if you have any questions. See you in the next video.